You won't believe this, but there are 5 tag teams that absolutely hated the Wild Samoans. And trust me, these rivalries were some of the most intense battles you'll ever hear about. So, sit back and get ready, because we're jumping in. Starting off strong, we've got Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, better known as the Soul Patrol. This feud with the Wild Samoans wasn't just a big rivalry in the WWF. It was also one of the most historically significant battles in tag team wrestling. The Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika, were already well established by the early 80s. With their wild, unpredictable style and that untamed, savage aura they carried to the ring, they were unlike anything the WWF audience had seen before. Managed by the legendary Captain Lou Albano, they were ruthless, chaotic, and dangerous, and that made them the perfect villains. On the other hand, you had Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, 2 charismatic, powerhouse athletes who had the speed, strength, and determination to stand toe-to-toe with anyone. The moment these 2 teams collided, it was clear sparks were going to fly. Their feud built up throughout 1983, and every match felt bigger than the last. The Wild Samoans would use their brawling tactics, double teaming, and sheer toughness to wear opponents down. But Johnson and Atlas brought a combination of athleticism and resilience that made them different. Fans rallied behind them because they weren't just another team. They represented something fresh and exciting in the tag team division. The rivalry reached its peak on November 15, 1983, when Johnson and Atlas finally defeated the Wild Samoans to capture the WWF Tag Team Championship. That wasn't just a title change, it was history in the making. Johnson and Atlas became the first African-American tag team to ever hold the WWF Tag Team titles, breaking barriers in an era when representation in wrestling was still very limited. It was a moment that went beyond just wrestling. It mattered culturally, and fans felt the weight of it. For the Wild Samoans, losing the belts didn't hurt their legacy. In fact, it only added to the intensity of their feud with the Soul Patrol. Every rematch was heated, every crowd was electric, and you could see just how important these battles were to the tag team scene at the time. Next up, we've got a really fascinating chapter in the Wild Samoan story, their rivalry with Bob Backlund and Pedro Morales. Now, this one was unique because Backlund and Morales weren't a regular tag team. They were 2 of the biggest singles stars in the WWF at the time. And when they joined forces against the Wild Samoans, it instantly felt like a huge deal. By 1980, the Wild Samoans had already cemented themselves as a dominant force in the WWF tag division. Managed by Captain Lou Albano, they were wild, unpredictable, and nearly unstoppable. But Backlund and Morales, they were the heroes of the WWF. Backlund was the reigning WWF champion, the clean-cut technical wrestler who represented the company with pride. Morales, on the other hand, was one of the most beloved stars of his era, especially adored by fans in New York and other major markets. Putting these 2 together against Afa and Sika created a clash that fans couldn't wait to see. Their feud heated up quickly, and on August 9, 1980, at Madison Square Garden, Backlund and Morales actually defeated the Wild Samoans to win the WWF Tag Team Championship. That victory was monumental because it wasn't just 2 stars holding belts. It was a rare case of 2 world-level singles competitors joining forces to take down one of the most dominant tag teams in the company. The crowd absolutely erupted for it, proving how big of a threat the Wild Samoans had become and how satisfying it was to see them toppled by 2 fan favorites. But here's where it gets interesting. The reign didn't last long, not because of a loss, but because of WWF's rules at the time. Since Backlund was already the WWF champion, he technically couldn't hold the tag belts too. This meant the titles were vacated, and the Wild Samoans quickly found themselves back in the mix for championship gold. It was classic WWF storytelling. Give the fans a shocking moment, stir up controversy, and then keep the heat alive by putting the belts back in play. What this rivalry did, though, was elevate the Wild Samoans even further. The fact that it took 2 of the top singles stars in the entire company to beat them, at Madison Square Garden no less, proved just how dangerous they really were. And while the titles didn't stay with Backlund and Morales for long, the feud itself left a lasting impression as one of the more unique and memorable moments in the WWF tag team scene. Moving along, we can't forget about the feud between the Wild Samoans and the unlikely but highly effective team of Junkyard Dog and Dick Murdoch in Mid-South Wrestling during the early 1980s. This rivalry might not always get as much spotlight as their WWF battles, but it was absolutely crucial in building the Wild Samoans' reputation outside the Northeast and proving that they could draw major heat wherever they went. At this time, the Wild Samoans were under the management of the infamous Skandor Akbar. And if you know your wrestling history, you know Akbar was one of the most hated managers in the business. His devastation Inkarnar stable was all about unleashing chaos, and the Wild Samoans fit right into that mold. They weren't just a team, they were Akbar's wrecking crew, and with him at their side, their dominance felt even more dangerous. On the flip side, you had Junkyard Dog, the top star of Mid-South and one of the most beloved wrestlers in the territory. Fans adored JYD. He had charisma, toughness, and a deep connection with the crowd that few wrestlers could match. Pair him up with Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch, a tough-as-nails brawler who could fight anyone, anytime, and you had a team that was as gritty as they were entertaining. The matches between these two sides were nothing short of wild. The Wild Samoans brought their usual brand of brutality, headbutts, brawling, and double teams that left opponents barely standing. Meanwhile, JYD and Murdoch fought with grit and raw toughness, refusing to back down no matter how much punishment they took. The chemistry was perfect. The Samoans were the villains everyone wanted to see beaten, and JYD and Murdoch were the heroes fans could believe in. The feud was also significant because it showcased just how versatile the Wild Samoans were. They weren't just working the polished WWF style, they could adapt to the rough, hard-hitting world of Mid-South, where matches often felt more like barroom brawls than traditional wrestling contests. And with Skandor Akbar constantly interfering and stirring the pot, the heat on these matches was through the roof. Now let's talk about another big rivalry in the Wild Samoans' WWF run, their battles with Chief Jay Strongbow and Jules Strongbow. This feud was all about pride, toughness, and championship gold. And it gave fans another reason to see just how dangerous Afa and Sika could be inside the ring. The Strongbows were a popular team in the early 80s. Chief Jay Strongbow had been a fixture in the WWF for years, known for his resilience, fighting spirit, and that fiery comeback that always got the crowd on its feet. When paired with Jules Strongbow, the two formed a solid, traditional babyface tag team that fans could rally behind. They weren't flashy, but they were tough, respected, and represented that fighting spirit that fans loved. On the other side, you had the Wild Samoans, still managed by the ever-scheming Captain Lou Albano. By this point, the Samoans had already proven themselves as one of the top tag teams in the WWF, with multiple championship reigns under their belts. Their style was raw and unorthodox, wild headbutts, unpredictable offense, and a chaotic energy that made them feel almost unstoppable. When these two teams clashed, it was the perfect mix of hero versus villain, order versus chaos. The rivalry really heated up in 1983 when the Strongbows managed to hold the WWF Tag Team Championship. For fans, this was a feel-good run, seeing a veteran like Chief Jay get another shot at glory alongside Jules. But the Wild Samoans were not about to let that story end happily. After weeks of build-up, brawls, and heated matches, Afa and Sika finally defeated the Strongbows to capture the titles once again. That victory was especially important because it marked the start of their third and final WWF Tag Team Championship reign. It was a statement win that reminded everyone just how dominant they were in the division. The Strongbows put up a strong fight, but in the end, the sheer power and unpredictability of the Wild Samoans were too much to handle. To round things out, let's talk about the Wild Samoans feud with Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch, also known as the North-South Connection. This rivalry came at an interesting point in the Wild Samoans' WWF run because in 1984, they briefly turned face. For a team that had spent years being some of the most hated villains in the company, seeing Afa and Sika on the good guy side of things gave their matches a fresh energy. And who better to feud with than a team as cocky and nasty as Adonis and Murdoch? The North-South Connection had quickly established themselves as one of the top heel teams in the WWF. They were complete opposites in personality. Adrian Adonis with his loud, flashy style, and Dick Murdoch with his rough, no-nonsense toughness. But together, they made an effective and dangerous pairing. Managed by Captain Lou Albano for part of their run, they captured the WWF Tag Team Championship from Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, ending the historic reign of the first African-American tag team champions. That alone made them despised by fans and perfect opponents for the Wild Samoans. The feud between these two teams was hard-hitting and gritty, as both sides relied heavily on brawling and brute force. The Samoans, now working as unlikely fan favorites, matched Adonis and Murdoch's aggression with their trademark wild style, headbutts, double teams, and unpredictable offense. What made it fun for fans was seeing the usual villains, Afa and Sika, suddenly fighting from the other side, rallying crowds and standing up to the cocky champions. While the Wild Samoans didn't recapture the belts during this run, their rivalry with Adonis and Murdoch played a big role in keeping the tag team division hot in 1984. Every match had that anything could happen energy, and the contrast in personalities made it entertaining. Adonis and Murdoch had that smug, sneaky heel charisma, while the Wild Samoans had the wild, hard-hitting style that always made them look dangerous. And that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more.